Video games would be nothing without their villains, be they legendary monstrosities out to destroy the world or just simple individuals trying to make a quick buck at the expense of others. We love to hate them, and it's for that reason that a good boss fight is one of the most cathartic experiences in video gaming. Sadly, for every epic showdown, there are a whole load of massive letdowns, and for today's list, we're going to look at a few. Now, we're not saying that the games on this list are disappointing in and of themselves. In fact, for the most part, today's entries are a bunch of properly decent games, but what we are saying is that some of their boss fights left us feeling a little unfulfilled. Think of these encounters like ordering a meal that sounds really good on the menu only for it to turn up and be completely bland. We will be talking major plot points, so a big spoiler warning is in effect. You have been warned. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most disappointing video game bosses. Number 10. Tyreen the Destroyer, Borderlands 3. We've said it before and we'll say it again, Borderlands 2 is one of the greatest games of all time, and that's due in large part to its big bad Handsome Jack. The problem with this was that it gave its sequel, Borderlands 3, some rather large shoes to fill, and sadly antagonists Tyreen and Troy Calypso just didn't have big enough feet for the task. Don't get us wrong, Borderlands 3 isn't terrible, but it is a bit disappointing in comparison to its predecessor, and the final boss fight is the cherry on top of the letdown sundae. The game tasks players with preventing the Calypso twins from accessing the Great Vault and harnessing the power within it. Being a Borderlands title, that involves a lot of shooting squishy NPCs right in their stupid faces, which is fine for the most part, but we had hoped for a little more when it came to the final showdown against Tyreen the Destroyer. When the Vault Hunters finally reach Tyreen, she has merged with the interdimensional monster that dwells within the Great Vault, but although she looks quite impressive, players need to do nothing more than just unload a few hundred rounds into her. Come on Borderlands, we know you can do better than that. Number 9. 343 Guilty Spark, Halo 3. There's nothing wrong with having an antagonist that's all brains and no brawn. In fact, some of the finest adversaries in gaming wouldn't know a Kalashnikov from a knuckle duster, and that's okay. As baddies go, 343 Guilty Spark is pretty decent. Initially masquerading as a helpful pal to Master Chief, during the events of the first game, he attempts to trick the super soldier into firing the Halo installation before Cortana reveals that, rather than destroying the Flood, it will actually wipe out all sentient life within 25,000 light years. In his defense, that is a solution to the Flood problem, though it does have some small downsides. Spark continues to be a thorn in Chief's side until the end of Halo 3, at which point the latter is forced to dispatch the former for good. Considering just how nefarious Spark was for the better part of 3 games, players probably expected a fairly grand showdown, but when it came down to it, they simply had to shoot it a couple of times. This makes sense. After all, Master Chief is a total badass, and Guilty Spark can only do that one energy beam thing, but it still felt like an anticlimactic kick in the teeth. Number 8. Moon Presence, Bloodborne. If we were allowed to use one word to describe From Software's 2015 masterpiece Bloodborne, it would probably be hard. If you were kind enough to allow us 2 words to describe the game, we'd probably go with really hard. Because of this, we're a bit stumped as to why the final boss, Moon Presence, is such a pushover. Alright, fine, pushover might be a bit strong. After all, Moon Presence is a Soulsborne boss and is therefore trickier to beat than your average video game boss, but in comparison to some of the other horrors that players face throughout the game, he's really quite weak. Moon Presence does have a couple of pretty nasty attacks, including one that prevents players from healing, and an unavoidable AoE shockwave that will reduce the hunter's HP down to 1. Ultimately though, Moon Presence is a bit of a glass cannon, and whilst he may have some decent offensive tactics, his own hit point pool is rather small, meaning that the vast majority of players had little trouble in taking him down. After spending hours fending off tough as nails nightmare fuel, it's a bit disappointing to be able to finish the game with such ease. Number 7. King Allant, Demon Souls. Since we're on the subject, we couldn't possibly talk about disappointing Soulsborne bosses without giving a mention to King Allant, the final boss of 2009's Demon Souls and its 2020 remake. Throughout both titles, players are tasked with dispatching a plethora of tough enemies and bosses, and most of them are controller-throwingly difficult to beat. Prior to taking on the true King Allant, players must face Old King Allant, a boss that can really pack a punch, and so once that was over and done with, most entered the final arena expecting to get absolutely minced. What actually happened, however, was that they were presented with a large, grotesque-looking slug thing that was completely incapable of defending itself. Don't get us wrong, we understand why King Allant has been transformed into a pathetic, amorphous blob, what with his lust for power having taken everything from him, but oh boy does it make for a disappointing ending. It's unsurprising that most players consider Old King Allant to be the true final boss of the game, and if you plan on playing Demon's Souls, we'd recommend turning off your console once you're done with him. Trust us, you're not really missing anything noteworthy beyond that. Number 6. The Hive Mind, Dead Space. When it released in 2008, Dead Space made a name for itself in the horror gaming field, and for good reason. It was atmospheric, told a great story, and perhaps most importantly, was pant-wettingly scary. Set aboard the ship Ishimura, Dead Space follows protagonist Isaac Clarke and his colleagues as they attempt to uncover what has happened to Isaac's girlfriend, Nicole. Sadly for them, the ship is overrun by necromorphs, corpses infected by a virus-like organism that transforms them into undead abominations. Ugh. What a shame. The necromorphs are genuinely terrifying, pose a huge threat, and keep players on the edge of their seats throughout the game. Unfortunately, though, we can't say the same for Dead Space's final boss, the Hive Mind, a creature that looks horrifying but holds up like a napkin in a blender. Its weak points are insultingly easy to hit, its attacks can be easily dodged, and even if players get grappled by it, they'll have no trouble shooting their way out of its grasp. Had the Hive Mind been anything but the endgame, players probably wouldn't have had any complaints about it, but it just felt like far too weak of a boss to round off an otherwise brilliant game. Number 5. Alduin, The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. Say what you will about Alduin, the lad certainly knows how to make an entrance. An exit, on the other hand, not so much. Players first meet Alduin at the beginning of Skyrim, when he immediately establishes himself as a terrifying and massively destructive menace. Though his appearance offers the Dragonborn the opportunity to escape the death penalty, this does come at the expense of many NPCs' lives. Still, freedom is freedom, I suppose, and with Alduin's initial attack behind them, players can head out into the world and start their adventure with the knowledge that, at some point, they'll probably need to go and deal with the dragon problem. The trouble is that by the time most players actually get around to the final Alduin boss fight, they've explored a great deal of Skyrim, leveled up a bunch, and are so OP that killing the dragon barely takes any effort. Don't get us wrong, it's a lot of fun to wander around Tamriel getting buff and ploughing through enemies like they're not even there, but, and feel free to call us old-fashioned, we still expected a little more oomph from a creature that's supposed to be the most fearsome thing on the planet. Number 4. Calamity Ganon, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. According to Metacritic, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild is the 14th best game ever made, having earned itself a staggering review score of 97. We feel like it would have gotten a perfect 100 though, had it not been for its disappointing final encounter. Following a 100-year snooze, everyone's favourite Peter Pan lookalike Link awakens with a bad case of amnesia. It's not long though before he realises that Ganon, now calling himself Calamity Ganon, presumably in an attempt to seem edgy, is up to his old world-destroying tricks again, the rascal. Someone's going to have to sort this sorry mess out, and it sure ain't going to be those bokoblins, so it looks like it's down to Link to put Ganon in his place. The trouble with this boss fight though is that it really isn't all that difficult. If they wish to, players can seek out the 4 pieces of Ganon scattered throughout Hyrule and take them down in order to make the final fight easier, but truth be told, it isn't necessary. In fact, some players have been able to finish off Calamity Ganon just a few minutes after starting the game, which really is a poor showing for a being that allegedly has the power to destroy the world. Come on, Ganon. Number 3. The Joker, Batman: Arkham Asylum. If you ask those who have played it, most will tell you that Batman: Arkham Asylum is one of the finest superhero games ever made. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the title sees Brucey Dubs trapped within Arkham Asylum after the Joker manages to take control of the place. By utilizing various bat gadgets and with a little help from Barbara Gordon, Batman must make his way through the facility in order to bring the Joker to justice. Throughout the game, Batman faces a number of fan-favorite villains, including the likes of Bane and Killer Croc, as well as a whole bunch of the Joker's goons. The vast majority of the combat encounters in the game are incredibly satisfying, and so it's a real shame that the big finale is such a letdown. There were a number of issues with the Joker boss battle, but the main 2 complaints were thus. Firstly, thanks to an overdose of Titan serum, the usually wiry Joker ends up more jacked than the Hulk, and secondly, the actual fight consisted of just taking down seemingly endless waves of minions. The whole scenario just didn't fit who the Joker is as a character, and served as a disappointing end to an otherwise flawless game. Number 2. Evelyn, Resident Evil 7: Biohazard. The vast majority of Resident Evil 7 is a fantastic spookfest that scared the plops out of even the most hardcore of horror fans, but oh boy, does its ending let it down. It feels like the developers got 95% of the game done, then decided to rush the rest so they could go down the pub, the spooky pub, the Resident Evil pub. Resident Evil 7 follows Ethan Winters as he searches the Baker house in Louisiana in the hopes of finding his wife Mia, who has been missing for 3 years. Far from being a cozy farmhouse, the Baker's home is a never-ending parade of bloodthirsty mutants and monsters. Villains Jack and Marguerite Baker are but victims in this whole situation though, as it transpires that they were once good people who were unfortunate enough to come into contact with the bioweapon Evelyn. Evelyn. Jack and Marguerite's boss fights are tense and terrifying, and so players were expecting more of that when it came to finally giving Evelyn what she deserved. What they got, however, was a grotesque blob that they were able to put down with a few pistol shots. It really was a slap in the face for everyone who had put the time in to finish the game, and no amount of Chris Redfield could ease the bitter disappointment that many players felt. Number 1. Adam Pacitti. When it comes to disappointing bosses, there are none that have let us down quite as much as Adam Pacitti. I'm joking. Adam, if you're watching, please don't fire me. I'm important. Number 1. Frank Fontaine. BioShock. The original BioShock is considered by many to be one of the greatest video games of all time, and so it's a massive shame that its final boss is such a letdown. Throughout the game, players are told what to do by the friendly-sounding Irishman Atlas, but it turns out that he's not who he claims to be and is in fact the villainous Frank Fontaine, the rival to Rapture creator Andrew Ryan. You'd think that this would lead to an epic and nail-biting boss encounter where good and evil fight to the death. Protagonist Jack and Fontaine do indeed go head-to-head, but the fight itself is a bit meh. Players find Fontaine transformed into a hulking blue creature thanks to a large dose of Adam. No, not that one. Far from being terrifying though, Fontaine simply runs around the player, who is free to rain bullets upon him. Every so often he stops for a little rest, during which time the player drains some of his Adam, and after a few rounds of this, he's beaten up by the Little Sisters. The big twist and the ending, no matter which one you get, are still brilliant, but we can't help but feel like they're soured by a boss fight that should have been far more entertaining than it actually was.